All right. Hey, everybody. Hey, I think I scared everybody off. I was such a downer last night with my presentation. So it's good to have you all in here. Thank you for being here. Thank you to our webinar folks for your patience, and hopefully everything's coming through. So today I'm going to talk about integrating money, mission, and media. So thinking about stewardship in the digital age, and share with you as a case study what we did for our stewardship campaign at my last church. So thinking about last year at my church, thinking about how to implement some of the learnings that I've come across in my research and conversations with friends, and just observing what people are doing and trends in digital media. Think about that in terms of evangelism, which we just heard in the space, faith formation, and stewardship. So I'm a full-time parish pastor. I serve at Upper Dublin Lutheran Church, which is just north of Philadelphia. And I've been in parish ministry for 14 years. I've served two different churches, very traditional churches. The first church was outside of Boston, founded in 1893. And my current church outside of Philadelphia, founded in 1753. So these are places that have deep roots and are more of your traditionally kind of modeled congregation. So a lot of what I do, I do research, I write books, I blog, I do different kind of digital projects. So I'm in touch with a lot of different people and observing and interviewing them about what they're seeing as trends in the church, saying, you're doing this interesting stuff. So tell me about what you're doing and tell me why you do it and tell me what you've learned. And then I often use that as my research, but then also I'm always thinking with the pastor's hat on, how can I take what you're doing in your mission start or your cutting edge work or the way that you're thinking about this or working on this, and how could I translate that and adapt that to my more traditional setting, whether that's in faith formation or evangelism or theology pubs or coffee shop, office hours, all kinds of different things, to try that on in a more traditional setting and to say, will this resonate? Does this fit for us? And like, how might this work for us, or how might we adapt it? And so I've been thinking about that in terms of stewardship a lot lately. I've been writing about digital media for the last 7 years or more. And I think stewardship has been one of the things that's been slower to emerge, whereas it's a little more obvious, I think, like how we might use these digital networks to reach out beyond our congregations in evangelism. And we're seeing how people can use these digital tools to help form faith and community inside our congregations. But stewardship has been the thing, I think, with seeing the contours of that, it's just taken a little bit longer, at least for me, to get my head around. So I want to kind of cast a larger kind of context for where we are with that in money, mission, and media, and then kind of distill that down to more of a case study and tell you kind of in the ins and outs of how I'm trying to think through that in my own particular setting. So one of the things that I like this slide from IBM, maybe you've seen, it's been out there for a while. It just talks about the ways in which our economy is changing because of digital technology. We see whole industries changing, or sometimes whole sectors destroyed because of technology. And you can see the way that these things are shifting. So a lot of times when we talk about stewardship in the church and money in the church, like yesterday, there was a little bit of this, I thought, there's the kind of assumption of, well, why should we try something different when we already have this model, right? When I go around and speak and stewardship comes up, because it always comes up. It's the first question I always get asked in digital ministry is, how do you have time for it? And the second is, how do you pay for it? Or is it going to pay for it? And what I kind of push back with people is to say, well, you're assuming that this model that we're operating under is going to last. And it's not. I mean, it's not going to last in the way that it has in like the post-war 20th century church. So we have to think about hybrid models of stewardship, different funding streams, different ways that we encourage people to support our mission, both in traditional pledging and stewardship campaigns, but also perhaps in other ways, in crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, and different financial models. That is also just starting to, I think, emerge. But I don't think we have to, just like we're all in these other areas of church having to experiment and iterate and try things, I think we have to do the same in the way we think about the financial well-being and the financial support for our missions and ministries. that's just also goes along with the technological changes we're experiencing in the world. And Pew Research has some data on this from a study from last year, talking about this new shared collaborative and on-demand economy, talking about Uber and Lyft and Airbnb and crowdfunding and gig economy. Just, you know, if you have a Netflix subscription, you're participating in this new media landscape. Or if you just watch videos on YouTube, you're participating in this huge shift away from broadcast television to subscription-based television, or HBO Now. Or if you have a Spotify account and you listen to streaming music and you pay a monthly subscription fee for that, as opposed to buying music on CDs or on iTunes per track or per album, you are participating in this new economy. I'm not going to go through all of the data, but part of also what we're seeing in the nonprofit sector in this shift that Pew has helped to track is the way people are participating in crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, which is becoming more and more popular in different ways, whether it's for funding for creative projects or a GoFundMe for a family who just experienced a tragedy in your local community like we had lately, and people set up a GoFundMe and people donate and raise money to help pay for the funeral, help care for the kids. And so we're seeing this big trend in crowdsourcing and crowdfunding, and more people are participating in that kind of charitable giving and fundraising. And one of the people that I think the person that I look to in this space to help me understand the digital and how the digital goes together with stewardship is Adam Copeland. Adam is at the Center for Stewardship. That's not the right term for it, but it's the Center for Stewardship Leaders at Luther Seminary. And he's just come out with a new book that he's edited. I think it's called Beyond the Offering Plate, which is a series of essays about stewardship in the 21st century, which is very accessible and good. And Adam is the person that I ask when I have a question about what does this all mean and how do we go about that. And I interviewed him for the second edition of my book, Click to Save, which comes out in a couple months. And I just want to share, it's a long quote, but I just want to share it with you so you just have a sense of where he's coming from. So I'm going to read it. It says, giving is based on a relationship. To the extent that social media and other digital tools help establish and continue to connect folks in life-giving relationships, that absolutely supports connections of financial gifts. Similarly, using social media tools can help continue that relationship, to report back and be transparent about what the gifts are doing, and change this gift from an abstract, I give to this organization, to something more personal through telling stories through social media. Understanding my gift to the organization helps support this particular story that I see on their Facebook page. The relationship then is mediated through this technology, but then I have the opportunity to invite others into it. And then inviting them to give is taking a step on the relationship journey. It's saying, I have these connections with these organizations or nonprofits or things that I care about, and I'm asking you to participate with me in them and help us create something new. There's this thing we want to exist in the world. Do you want to see it too? Typo. I hope I fixed that in the book. If so, let's create it together. We need you to be part of this project, and because of your gift, it will become a more fulfilling and better end goal as a result. He says, congregations don't do that well. Everything is already established. The cherry is already on top of the budget, but we invite people to support the mission rather than inviting them in to help develop a process, right? And so that really captures, for me, I think we have the entire quote in the book because I think it's so important, the way that this digital, networked, relational mode of being in the world and in ministry can translate into the way that we think about our stewardship, that it's really about, and churches are always about relationships, but we miss that so much. You know, like churches are networks. Churches are about relationships. They are networks of relationships, but we've not foregrounded that so much. That's a whole other topic. So, but basically, and we quote Adam in our second edition, Click to Save Reboot. And kind of what we've been doing. The first edition came out in 2012, so we were writing it in 2011, and the second edition now we were writing last year, and it comes out this spring. And so for the last 7 years, we've been really tracking it's kind of become this ethnography of digital ministry. So we've been tracking some people for that entire time, and we've been seeing how some people have kind of faded out of that space and how some people have come into that space. And so what's been interesting to couple like kind of our work and tracking this over time and Adam's work, he wrote this Christian Century article. You may have seen it was a cover article in the Christian Century about crowdfunding and stewardship. It's a really great article. And as I was reading this article, I was like, oh my gosh, these are all the people that we wrote about in our first edition of this book who we thought were so amazing in these digital spaces. And so I want to share a few of those stories with you and kind of tracking how their commitment, their experimentation, their presence in these digital spaces has a connection to the way that they think about funding their mission work, right? Yes.
I just want to make a comment before you move beyond the 2 points.
Yeah.
First, I'm very familiar with GoFundMe, and I've had family and others reach out to me at that.
Yeah.
And the issue with that is it's reached a point where there are so many ways that people can tap your shoulder and ask for money that stewardship has a lot of, to be blunt, has a lot of competition.
Absolutely. Yep.
And I've also done stewardship campaigns. What I learned very early is you're exactly right. It's about relationships. If people don't feel that the church is a central part of their life, you're not going to get much money out of it. I need to be crass about it. That's what it comes down to. It's not important.
Right, where your treasure is, where people put the
the only time you talk stewardship is during a stewardship campaign, or you don't have to talk in active. If you reach out to these people that are quiet, maybe in the back row, they don't have common interests, and try to pull them into the church, if you do that, stewardship will kind of take care of itself. So you could watch down the road, but I think you did the 2 main ones right
okay.
at the beginning.
Yeah, thanks. Yep.
Yeah, but I'm just really struck with the contrast you're drawing between, say, a GoFundMe and a traditional stewardship campaign. Because the pull of the GoFundMe is, hey, look at this thing that could be. If we all get involved, this thing could happen.
Yeah.
Right? That's the GoFundMe.
Right.
And then the traditional stewardship campaign is, hey, we've already built this thing. Like your quote says. Yeah. Cherries on top.
Right.
Now we need you to pay for it.
Right. Yeah.
It's a complete flip. And I've never quite put that in my head until you just sort of present.
Well, what you're really doing is not paying for it, you're continuing.
Yeah, right.
Right now, my current job is a parish administrator, and stuff breaks all the time.
Right.
When I left the Army, I went into business, and my boss taught me, for the first time in your life, you got to understand the importance of money. You treat money, you say, money's like air, you don't live for it, but you can't live without it. That's, it's kind of a popular topic around the parish, but it's something you kind of have to back in mind, or you can't even operate.
Right. I think part of that part of the shift here, Matthew, is that people are much more empowered because of social media. People have a voice and they have a lot of agency because they can start a GoFundMe, they can start a blog, they can start a YouTube channel. So there's an assumption that we all carry now is that I have a voice and I have agency. And so instead of like, we'll put it on for you and we want you to fund it, like come in and support what is planned, bringing people into the process, however you would imagine that to be, is empowering for people. And I think when sometimes in church still, because of this flip in model, sometimes people who are very empowered, whether it's because of digital technologies or they're very empowered because like they're at their work and they're doing amazing jobs and they have all these responsibilities and they come to church and it's like, we just want you to sit and listen. Like I think that's part of the challenge of social media at time. I sort of feel that, like just getting people to sit and listen for an hour, so when they're used to being more active.
If you're going to get to this later on, just refer it. But one of my challenges listening to this is I keep trying to think, how am I going to engage a GoFundMe approach versus, this could happen kind of thing. When the expense of my ministry is 70% of the operating budget is personnel.
Yeah.
So how do you, and then so if you try to make a narrative about what this person does towards this thing that could be and so forth. You can't get around it not sounding like, well, so-and-so goes to so much percent goes to administrative expense.
Mm-hmm.
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
So it makes it difficult to bridge the transition to a different way, a different philosophy of funding when you've got that reality sitting in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, we've inherited these institutions that do remarkable things, and that mission needs to be continued and funded.
It's what is people.
Yeah, I'm going to get to that. Great, that's where I've headed on our fall campaign. So I just want to share some examples, and I'm not going to read all this. There's a lot of text, but this is all going to be posted later, so you can dig in a little bit more if you want. One of the churches that we've written about over these last 8 years is Humble Walk Lutheran Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. It's been a church without walls that's embedded in the west end neighborhood of St. Paul. And Jody told us this. We quote her again in the book, but this was back in 2011 when I talked to her. Since I don't have an office or physical structure, it's a place where I'm digital, like social media is the place I'm most present. For me, it's Facebook or email and text, and it's all technology based. And I would have never dreamed that would be my most consistent presence as a pastor, but it really is how it happened and how it continues to happen. So their first, I think, worship service was in a coffee shop. And they said, how are we going to stay in touch after this? And it was a Facebook group, which they've still kept going. And people are helping to tell and retell their amazing story about the ministry that they're doing in the neighborhood. But it's very relational based. It's very locally driven. They gather in local gathering spaces. And it's also digitally driven. The website, e-newsletters, in the email, Facebook group. And so they're kind of very kind of locally and digitally networked. And so this is part of the DNA of this church, and it's a mission start church. So it's not like, a church that's been around for 200 years that has to sustain itself. They're kind of they're making it up as they go. And I think Jody might even, would not be offended that I put it that way, because I think they are. And one of the things that Adam wrote about in this Christian Century article was about a crowdfunding project that they had done, because original music and homegrown music is a big part of their worship experience. And so what they had done was they wanted to have this thing exist in the world, which was this album of original music that they could use in their liturgy, but then they could share with other people. And they raised $9,000 in a month to create this on this Kickstarter campaign. So there are different types of crowdfunding platforms. Kickstarter is one where you have to meet your goal in order for it to be funded. If you don't meet your goal, then the money goes back to the donors. So they reached their goal. And Jody said, artists got to write songs, or studio people got to do what they are created to do. We get to give it all away, and we got to invite others along in the process. I thought part of the success of this project was the fact that they had been, the way they were in ministry lent itself to people being connected to them, to caring about them and networked with them. So even if you didn't go to that church, even if you didn't live in St. Paul, even if this kind of music wasn't exactly your thing, you cared about what the Humble Walk was about and what they were trying to do and be in the world. And because you can reach so many more people, lots of small gifts made this project happen. On a larger scale, St. Lydia's Dinner Church is one of my favorite things to write about. It's in Brooklyn, New York, and it's a congregation. There's a Mission Start congregation, and their primary worship is dinner church. And now they have a storefront space in Brooklyn where they have dinner church, but it's also a co-working space. Also, when they're not gathered for worship or church community events. And so I talked to them about 7 years ago as well. They were kind of part of our original crew that we interviewed. And Emily Scott, who is the pastor there, just talked about how it's a very ancient practice that they have in their worship, and yet they were using digital technologies to really capture and share the life of their congregation and to be connected with one another. So creating community together, and then sharing, they have a lovely website. On one of the earlier versions of the website, they had a blog, and they would post recipes from dinner church. So and she described the blog as artifacts of their life together, so that people could share. So I just thought it was cool, because of course at dinner church, what would you put on your blog? You would put recipes of the things that's part of who you are. And so they were telling their story to lots of different people, and like people like me who are in a traditional church, like for our Lenten Wednesday night gatherings, let's shift out of, for Lutherans, hold an evening prayer, which is very well loved and well worn, and let's do dinner church. So we didn't become a dinner church, but on Wednesday nights, we organized our worship that way. Emily had sent me one of their worship services so I could see how it went and what they did. And we tried it on. And so because they were able to report out what they were doing and what they were discovering and the life of their congregation, when it came to raise money to help fund this new storefront, people were willing to help support them, people within the congregation and people beyond the congregation. And so they were able to raise an amazing $33,000 from 263 funders. And I was kind of watching this happen in real time over social media as this campaign was going. And it was really amazing to see people giving and donating and supporting, and also Emily's response of complete amazement that so many people would jump in and support it. And she said, a campaign like this builds community in a serious way. A few days into the campaign, I realized that I wasn't the only one refreshing my browser every few minutes to see when donations were coming. It was an exciting thing that the community could participate in and build a lot of ownership. So the storefront was funded in lots of different ways from their members. Well, I don't know all the funding streams, but I know it was funded in multiple ways, not just this. This wouldn't cut a storefront in New York. But part of their funding strategy was to reach out to this network of people that they had cultivated and who wanted to see this thing exist in the world. This is Adams. If you want to Google it later or look it up even now, this is his article in the Christian Century, A Broader Appeal, How Crowdfunding Inspires Creative Ministry. And you could even reverse that and say how creative ministry inspires crowdfunding. Another example, Trinity Place Shelter, which is a Lutheran church in Manhattan. And they host the Trinity Shelter, which is a shelter for LGBTQ youth and young adults. And on the coldest day of the year, their boiler broke. And so they had all these kids who were living in the building. So it wasn't just about getting it warm enough for worship on Sunday morning, but people were actually living there. And so they created a CrowdRise campaign. So CrowdRise is another platform to fund the boiler. And they raised, it's actually over $41,000 now. So on CrowdRise, you can create a campaign, and then people can create under their own accounts, help to fundraise in support of that campaign. And so you had a mission here. So again, they were doing this outreach ministry, which was part of the urgency of having to get the heat back on, but also they were doing all this outreach and mission work, and people wanted to support that. So now the thing is, crowdfunding is not the magic bullet to our stewardship challenges about funding our missions. And sometimes we can look at technologies as the magic bullet for all kinds of different things in the church. If we're just on this or we just do that, then the millennials will come and everything will be fine. Of course, we all know it doesn't work that way. And when you share stories like this, you can look at that and read Adam's article and think, well, we just need to do some crowdfunding. But what is part of that story is the important long-term work of building relationships, because social media is all about relationships, about building networks and building relationships and giving away oftentimes our best ideas and our best stuff and being very generous about that so that when there's a time of need, that support and energy can flow back to us. Another example, and this isn't a crowdfunding example, but a different way of thinking about stewardship. So I have a friend of mine, Mark Huber, who has started a Mission Start Church in Marshfield, Massachusetts, which is on the South Shore, just south of Boston. And it's been an amazing story of how that church has come to be. He started off in a coffee shop, in the local coffee shop, and then the Methodist church there was closing, and the Methodists were thinking about also doing a mission start. And so the Lutherans and Methodists joined forces and took over this building and renovated it. And it's this thriving, amazing congregation now, which is a super hard thing to do anywhere, but in Massachusetts, it's and it's really, really hard. The levels of religious affiliation are so high in the Northeast and Pacific Northwest. And so he talks about being this place where people who are seekers or spiritual but not religious, or really haven't figured out their faith, or are nuns, the spiritually unaffiliated, can come and feel like they're not being judged, that they have a place and they can fully participate. And so I asked them, they were trying this thing with stewardship called shares. So they had posted this on their website. And I think it's not like the main thrust of their stewardship campaign, but I thought it was a really interesting way of helping people who are newer to the church to think about stewardship, because the idea of shares is becoming more and more familiar with CSAs, so community sustained, yes, supported agriculture, where people can buy a share and then they get vegetables or whatever you buy into for your CSA. And he, kind of like one option or way to think about giving to sanctuary is to think about it in terms of shares. So our average giver is young, hasn't actively given to the religious organization, has little theological background about stewardship. And so shares help us both define expectations and participation, while also opening up an entry point for stewardship and generosity conversations. And giving to a church is not unlike a CSA, really. But Mark's really great about putting things out there that, have some cultural resonance for people, that they can use that as a jumping off point to encouraging people in ways to think about stewardship for this newer church. Another example, and then I'll end with the examples. Another example and way to think about this is a great example of Society of St. John the Evangelist in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And Jamie Coates, who is like one of my heroes there, who has been involved in the development for Society of St. John. And I interviewed him for my book, The Digital Cathedral. And they do amazing social media work. This little monastery, I love, I used to go retreats at when I was in divinity school, has this incredible digital footprint where they're putting out all kinds of material, whether it's printed or video material, on their website, in emails, on Facebook, all kinds of different ways. And I asked him about this, like, why do you do it? How do you think about how you do it and why? And he said, although I'm in charge of fundraising and communication, 95% of my job is figuring out how to give away the brothers' wisdom. How do we connect and give people wisdom that feeds them? He said, if you understand you truly live in the gift economy and you're truly giving away God's gift for the sake of God's love, then it flows back to you. So their a huge part of their development philosophy is that in giving away the brothers' wisdom, which is all right there, because they're preaching all the time. They're creating this content all the time. And even just, every day they have something called Brother Give Us a Word. And it's the word for the day. And it's a sentence or two on that theme, whether it's peace or hope or forgiveness or love or reconciliation. And they have a huge email list of people that receive Brother Give Us a Word every day. And so they have, in giving away this monastic wisdom, created a huge network of people who are invested in the life and work and mission of that monastery, and who in the monastery has need to renovate their building or support the work that they do, people are willing to support it because they care about it and they receive so much value from it. I asked Jamie, so I had the first chance to meet Jamie in person, even though I had interviewed him before here at VTS not too long ago. And I said, how did you come to this idea of the giving away? And he recommended this book to me called The Gift Economy by Lewis Hyde, which is a book from the 80s. And it's a book about creativity, mainly the idea that, like, for the artist, for the creative, though you wouldn't have called it a creative in the 80s, they were artists. Basically, like, what we receive is like, it's a gift. Like, he says for the artist, our work begins with not so much creation, but invocation. And like, we receive these things as a gift, and then in the giving them away, they are kind of the true fulfillment or the destiny of that gift of, just like a writer or a poet or a filmmaker that kind of puts their thing out into the world and gives it to the world as a gift. And so like the whole book is pretty dense, I will have to tell you. I read it like really fast. I was like, I ordered it right away as soon as he told me. But chapter 8 in that book, if you want to look on Google Books, I'll save you a lot of the, if you want the anthropological viewpoints and stuff that are in it, you can read the whole book. But I would say chapter 8 is the thing you should read if you're really interested in that. So some different ways of thinking about how we engage people, but it's the people who have been at this work for a while and really invested in networks and relationships and the way that those are facilitated by digital tools and digital platforms are the people who are now also at the forefront of figuring out what that means for stewardship practices and funding our missions. One of the things Kyle's working on and just launched as another example is that there's a website called Patreon, where if you are a creative, you're an artist, you want something to exist in the world, you can create this thing where people can become your patrons, which is a very old idea. But this website makes it easy, and you can become a patron at different levels. So for $1 a month or $2 a month or $3 or $5 a month, you can support Kyle in the work that he's doing. And there's a very clear structure in Patreon about how this works, and you're providing value to people in some way. Or, you know, he said, if I reach a certain goal, then I'll be able to do this. And if I reach another goal, I'll be able to create this. And if I reach another goal, I'll be able to create that. And he's up to past $40. This was screenshot as a few days. I think he's up to $87 a month or something like that. But that's a really cool, you might check that out. Like if you have a particular side project that you're working on, this is more for kind of individual creators or small group creators, but that's a really cool platform that people are taking to. You know, and if you put it on the internet, and a lot of people give $1 a month or $2 or $3 or $5 a month, it can really add up. Like Pete Rollins has one and he's raised a bunch of stuff, or the Liturgist podcast has one and they've raised a bunch of money to support the work that they're doing as well. One of the things that I'm kind of thinking about, this is not my case study, but one of the things that I'm working on right now is that our congregation was one of 12 congregations to receive a Zoe Project grant from Princeton Theological Seminary and the Lilly Endowment to launch a new young adult initiative or young professional initiative. We were hearing at the last session what the proper terminology was, but basically for people who are 22 to 32 roughly, or 23 to 29. And part of the challenge for this is that it's a $20,000 grant to launch something, but part of the plan has to be how it becomes sustainable over time. And so we've been talking a lot about the mission and what it's going to be and how we're going to do it, but also then how does it get paid for? You know, like we have the $20,000 to start, but yeah, that can go pretty fast depending on what you're trying to do. So what we're looking at and wondering about is, it's probably going to be like a standalone nonprofit 501c3 kind of thing. But we're looking at subscription models. Do you think about something like a Netflix model where there's like a monthly, or a Patreon model where people are sustaining it not through annual pledge gifts, but through like a subscription and different levels of subscription? So people who are involved and who take part in the project, or maybe even people who don't but want to see it happen, and so they become members or subscribers or patrons in some way of our project. We're talking about a particular physical space that we're working with, and how can that physical space be a multi-purpose space, both so the community could use it, we can facilitate things in the community for young adults, but also if people need a space and wanted to rent it or use it on a more regular basis, could that be part of our revenue stream? These are all things I didn't learn, in seminary, as like, there's always so many things that we didn't learn in seminary, but in terms of the stewardship, thinking about those things. Fortunately, our seminarian that's working with us has a business degree that really, really helps. But we have to diversify the ways that we're thinking about how we fund that. And it really that's the cutting edge for me of thinking about, well, how are then, I think figuring out this particular project is going to, in the long run, help us to figure out how, as a more the established congregation that's helping give birth to this thing, how we're going to figure that out, moving forward. But it's a different way for me of imagining. It's work I've never had to do because I've been in churches where we just follow a more traditional stewardship model. Okay, I'm going to pause here, talking a lot, because then I'm going to move to kind of the case study and share what we did this fall. But are there any questions, comments, observations about any of this? Yeah.
Going back to the church shares you had talked about earlier, maybe I missed this, but how's that really sold to members or the congregation as a means of contributing? So when I think of, my wife and I participate in CSA. So
yeah.
We pay more money, we get more in return.
Mm-hmm,
That's what I'm thinking of when I hear that.
right.
More access to God.
Right. I have 40 shares. Yeah, I think there's. Yeah, and they have a suggested price for. They have a suggested price for shares, right? That's right. And they have you might think of a share as being X amount of dollars, right? Which is a little more prescriptive than some of our churches would want to be as well. And you could decide what you wanted to give. But yeah, I think it has theological limits on that. But it's kind of doing some cultural translation. But, like St. Lydia's, which is a mission start, and Humble Walk, they're having to educate their folks on what stewardship is, because a lot of them are made up of people that don't have that church experience. And you can see in your own congregations how older generations have given out of a sense of duty, and it's just we've relied on those people, and in our own church we've had people that we've relied on so much to have been stalwarts for us in so many ways, including in giving, and they're getting older and they're just not able to do that. And trying to reach younger generations in our stewardship campaigns and connect with the things and the reasons that they would want to give. It's different. I mean, it's different. It's not, we're part of this church and we're giving to support it, of course. No, we got to have to make the case more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I actually think his point's well taken. If the only time you have the people from your church reach out to you is when they want your money. Mm-hmm. And actually, the jazzy of the presentation, probably the less of the, I can remember even as a child when I was raised, that we would have these big building campaigns. Mm-hmm. The only time you see the pastor is when they got a building campaign out there.
Right.
And the jazzy of the presentation, the more cynical you get about it. So
right.
I think it all starts off with, just like you said right at the beginning, is build a relationship with it. So these people are feel that the church is an important part of their life, and these campaigns should be educational, telling them what we need it for, but not so much trying to get them up into it.
Right.
Find indulgence, with God. And I've seen it where again, very cold, distant congregations, then all of a sudden they become your best pal and win your money.
Right.
That not only will not get your money, it'll probably drive you out of the church.
Right. That's what Jen was saying yesterday about authenticity. It's got to be consistent over time. I think there's a webinar question.
Yeah. There's a question from the web from Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
She asks, how do you engage parishioners in this type of approach when not all of your members are savvy?
Right. That's a great question. When people aren't all savvy. So, I mean, we're just in a time where we're bridging broadcast and social media. We're bridging print and digital content, and we just have to do a good job at both right now. And eventually, I'm trying to get people to use Sign Up Genius, at church. And it's like people, I have kids in school, our lives are run by Sign Up Geniuses. That is the base level of technology in our lives, and it just goes up from there. But introducing Sign Up Genius and to say to the Accolade scheduler, you could use Sign Up Genius, for that. Oh, wow. Or signing up to serve when we feed the homeless once a month. We use Sign Up Genius for that now. And it's it sends you a reminder, which is, fabulous. So I think you have to be sensitive because people can feel like they've been cut out or they're part of a conversation that's happening that they're not involved in and plugged into. So you have to be like very sensitive about that. There's a lot of fear, worry, lament, maybe resentment about in so many ways in the world about how things have changed, whether it's technologically or culturally. And so you don't want people to feel left out. So, you know, I think it's a constant negotiation about the digital and face-to-face or print and digital. Yeah.
Well, success story though, my mother just ordered Instacart for the first time. And she, I don't really know what this thing is. My wife helped her get the account going, and this is what you do.
Yeah.
When those groceries showed up at her door, she was like, I get it. She's sold.
Awesome.
So sometimes, you know, people just need to see the fruit of it.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and like putting stuff out that's you know, done in non-threatening ways. So I was thinking of an example of that. Okay, so like one example may be that every year we raise money for scholarships for students in Tanzania with our sister congregation in Lushoto. And it's a program that we've run a long time, and we're again like in a position where we'd like to reach new donors to help us raise really $10,000 a year for scholarships. And we need to raise new donors and younger donors to help sustain that program. And we're in the staff meeting, and I said, why don't we use like a CrowdRise? You can create an online, you know, a campaign for it, like GoFundMe or, you know, take your pick. But why don't we do that? And then people can also share, like somebody said, like, you know, for Christmas, I asked friends to give to different projects, charitable projects, because I much prefer that than getting something. And so you create that, and then you reached a whole, you know, much larger audience of people who might be willing to donate. And even if it's at smaller levels in scale, it can add up. And then people can share that campaign with their friends and their friends and their friends. Of course, that's how social networks work. And so I'm hoping that in addition to kind of the traditional way that we've done it, which has been like, you know, if you read the bulletin and you're in church, you know about it, and maybe you get it on the email as well. And, you know, we can also do, in addition to that, the online piece of it and try to cultivate some new support, you know, for the program. Any other? So I think the timing is good here. So I wanted to share this campaign that we ran this fall. And this is my own translation, interpretation of some of these things. So I've been kind of thinking about these stories and living with some of these stories for a while. And I got put in charge of stewardship this year. So I said, well, we're just going to go for it and try this out. And this was a kind of stewardship and evangelism and branding campaign, kind of all at one, that we did this fall, which was a lot to take on. It's really exhausting, but I kind of wanted to see it happen. And so we did, and we called our stewardship campaign, which really had a kind of a bigger theme, kind of almost introducing kind of a new brand and look for the church, called Change Lives, Change the World, which just kind of came to me in a, you know, lightning bolt moment at one point. And it just spoke to the ways that as we're gathered as a church, people's lives are changed by being part of this community. And service is a huge part of who we are and what we do. It's part of our DNA. And so we go out and change the world. And so for me, this bit kind of captured, this phrase captured some of that. And I worked with friends of mine who do marketing and branding. And so we created this brand from scratch. And I really love it. Like, I love it way more than I should, you know, show anything that's not a person or, but, you know, we talked a lot about how we would capture some of the feeling and flavor of the congregation. And there's a sense that we are very rooted, and also we're very active and alive, and we're traditional in some ways and non-traditional in lots of other ways. And so this kind of combination of fonts really helped work for us and captured, we're rooted, but we have this energy, and we're kind of spilling out here, there, and everywhere, of which if you came to my church, you would see, we're a lot. And the kind of rainbow, kind of the gradations was really about helping people to be able to follow with their eye across the brand. So when you put it all together and you have stacked words, you know, where do I read? I'm thinking like people might not be intuitive for people, even though it's mostly left to right. And so we did the color that way that would help draw your eye kind of across. It would make a little more logical sense. And I like it that it's a rainbow, so it's very welcoming too. And then the church name. So we kind of worked on, I had this idea, and Sarah and Virginia and I kind of worked on this a bit. And I have to say that whether it's for a brand or thinking about the stewardship campaign, this was some of the best time and money that I've ever spent in the church, because I can be a kind of a perfectionist about such things, but everything in our church, because there's so much going on and so many people are involved, everything looks different. The colors are different, the fonts are different. And so I like a little more consistency in terms of those things. And in creating a brand, what we were able to do too, this is one of my favorite things too, is that we have brand guidelines. We're so like, I love this. So we have the brand, and we have some different iterations of the brand in color with the church name and grayscale. And then we have like what colors are involved in the brand here, and then what the fonts are here. And so like this is the marching orders now for anything that comes out of, hopefully theoretically as best we can, comes out of the church. So the brand appears, and then we try to, like in our weekly emails and other things that we're doing or printing, able to use the colors to match to what we're doing. So the stewardship campaign was kind of the introduction to the brand, but we've been able now to carry that forward. Like now it's like the directory cover. And so the colors, so like when we were doing our church directory cover, we actually had colors that matched and were complementary to each other, because we have these in terms of the fonts as well. And we've been using it for a number of other things, both in print and digitally. And that really helps us. That's been like, I kind of had a dream about having something like this, but it's been incredibly helpful in just improving our overall communications and our overall look. Like our congregation is a great congregation. It's very competent, energetic, very professional kind of congregation. And it never had a message and a look that really reflected that or honored that. And I feel like this is the kind of thoughtful, cool, contemporary something that this church should have. And that was part of the idea of it. Yeah.
The word change, the typeface, is really funky.
Yeah.
And change, people are afraid of change. Is
Yeah.
some meaning in the
Yeah, I know we say it twice, changed and change. That's a lot of change for a church.
The first change is really different.
Yeah, yeah. My church is a lot about change. So my church is like always asking what's next.
Really?
Yeah, they're amazing. But it's always like, what's next? Let's try. You want to try that? Great. Okay, let's try that. Oh, let's do this. Oh, it didn't work. All right, we'll try this thing now. So it really does capture a lot of the spirit of the church, and they're interested and fascinated by change, and they're not scared of change, which is pretty amazing. Yeah.
The change in the world there's a lot of movement in those letters, and having that consistency and being very put together is helpful for churches. I know it was helpful for us. We saw a difference in giving when we were more put together and didn't look as visually disheveled,
yes.
Untucked, if you will.
Yeah.
And people were more willing to invest in having someone who had their act together.
Yeah.
Visually.
Yeah.
So people who are more traditional look and see messy, if you're all different on all different avenues, and they saw us being more consistent and concise, and that was helpful.
I think that's part of like the digital shifts too, is like design is a huge, and good design is more accessible now. Yeah, and it's more accessible to people, and like this thing you carry in your pocket, like, I mean, Apple just is like crazy about design. But you can look at all the videos, which of course I do, about like how things are made and how they're designed. It's like way over the top. I understand that. But like you're carrying this piece of design in your pocket in addition to all the other things that it can do for you. And so I think we have a more a better sense of how things could look and should look. And sometimes people are doing that on their own because tools are more available to amateurs now. Yeah, for that. So I want to share a few videos. So the heart of, sorry, that's me, but the heart of the project we created was to do a video series. And we hired a company who had done some great work with the Presbytery of Philadelphia to do this for us. So we wouldn't do this every year, but it was something that we, oh, you're gonna do the sound. Okay. But we decided to put this video to get some help because I was gonna edit it all myself. And my stewardship co-chair said, no, we need you to be a pastor, not the video editor. And so we got this company to help us out. And they were really great small company in Philadelphia. If you're looking for somebody in Philly, I can tell you, Arsenal Media Works. But we did basically a whole video series about how lives of our members have been changed by being a part of our community and how they go out and change the world. And our criteria for that, and this is just the pastor talking in this one with some B-roll, but I'm going to share a couple videos, were people who I thought our code word was secretly awesome. So people, not the people you hear all the time talking in church, or just are kind of people everybody knows, but kind of surfacing some of those other stories, those like secretly awesome people and stories. And, you know, some of it I anticipated, but a lot of, you know, it's amazing. Like we put people in front of the camera and there's all this gear and people they don't know, and they really opened up to us in some pretty profound ways. So this is the introductory video. It's like 1 minute long, so we could post it on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and it would be, you know, short enough so that we can do that, and the other ones are a little longer. So this is the introduction to the campaign.
Just turn up your speaker. I think it's muted right now. See if we can play the video.
Can't access the volume here for some reason. I don't know if it's because.
Play the video and see if this sounds good.
So change lives, change the world. What does that mean? Well, when I think of Upper Dublin Lutheran Church, what I think about are all the people and the stories that they've shared with us about all the ways their lives have been changed through worship and community and learning, through all of their outreach and service that they do.
The true test, they say in evangelism, is if the people in the pews who are not asked to do anything are the ones who take initiative. And that is a wonderful witness, I think. That doesn't happen every day.
And so Upper Dublin is a place where people gather and their lives are changed. And lives are not just changed for the sake of our community. Our lives are changed so we can be sent out to help change the world. And I'm excited in this campaign to share some of those stories more broadly with our congregation.
Really nice.
They did a
Yeah.
good job. Yeah, they really captured our story beautifully. And so then we did these short 2.5 minute videos. And so through the campaign, we basically showed that on the first Sunday of the stewardship campaign. And then we showed 2 congregational stories a week. So rather than the temple talks, which always take longer, because once people stand up, you can't control what's going to happen. You know, these are 2.5 minute videos. We're in, we're out, and it's not belaboring it. And at the beginning, we didn't even call it stewardship. This is our Change Lives, Change the World campaign, to kind of, so people would suspend what they have, you know, come to like think about as stewardship. Like, we're not going to be asking you for money like every week and hammering it, you know, home and all that stuff. We just want you to hear these stories. And so this was the first story that we shared, the story of the Redding family, and it got us off to a great start.
So I grew up Catholic and went to Catholic church, and all was good and fine. And then I met my husband, and he's Buddhist. So we were kind of looking for somewhere where we could meet in the middle. And I was still searching, and a friend of mine asked me to come on a women's Bible retreat. And I went, and I was hooked.
Each church has its own identity, and this church to me struck as soon as I was here. And the people here were so welcoming to me and my wife. I was born in Vietnam and a refugee. In 1975, my parents, my father was an American GI and my mother was Vietnamese, and they married. And we escaped from Vietnam on the last day of evacuation. People here were so welcoming. It brought that back to me in my mind. How when we came over to the United States, my father's family was all there at the airport. welcome to me. So this church was almost a second week for me.
From looking around at 6 different churches and hoping that we would find a community where we would fit in and be welcome. And now I look 6 years, 7 years later, and now it's just ingrained in our lives. And this church is a part of our everyday lives.
I think the way that UDLC works is it's like you can light 1,000 candles with one single candle. Sharing happiness can never decrease if that's maintained. You know, you can keep things going and going as long as you have your heart and your soul into it. It can't be stopped.
UDLC has empowered me to change the world, to have a place where I can come, recharge, get focused, and then go out and be the best Christian that I can be out in our busy world today.
I have a question for you. Did you become a Christian?
No. Well, he worships every Sunday, and he's our property superintendent now. So yeah, he's sort of he's a Lubu, Lutheran Buddhist too. So yeah, and he's like he's our new property superintendent as of last year, and he is so chill because I think part of it is that Buddhism, and so he's like the most non-anxious presence in the world at our church, and we really needed that. So he's fabulous. But I didn't know that story about him being a refugee from Vietnam. Nobody knew that story at church, but he opened up about it in this interview, and that was the first video that we showed, and everybody was like, "Oh wow, oh wow, this
I
is."
have a lot of dealing with Vietnamese refugees, and by and large, you're probably the most impressive group of people you're going to meet.
Yeah, yeah.
No complaints. They don't consider themselves victims. They should dig in.
Yeah, they're amazing.
So you showed the videos in church and then posted them?
Yeah. So what we did was we create this video series, which is like a stewardship series in church, and then evangelism. So we post 2 videos on Sunday, or we show 2 videos on Sunday. We sent a midweek email. We use MailChimp. So we sent a midweek email where we packaged these 2 videos with a little introduction to them. And then we had members of our stewardship team do a little write-up, but we're like 300 words or something. It was small enough that it wasn't, you could put it in the email and not be too overwhelming. And links to the website. And so we did the 2 videos on Sunday, we did the follow-up on Wednesday, and we did that for like 4 or 5 weeks, starting in early October. So we did 3 intensive weeks of this. In October, we took Reformation Day off because it was 500th anniversary, except we did a spoof of this with people who were dressed up as Martin and Katie Luther for Reformation Day. And they said, "So how's the Lutheran Church change your life?" to Martin Luther. It's like, "Don't you know who I am?" We made it kind of a funny skit that we shot. So we had shown 6 of these already. And then it started come up with a logo and everything. And then like here they are, like this great couple from church dressed up as Martin and Katie Luther. And we were interviewing them. And it was pretty fun.
The stewardship evangelism connection is amazing. Because so often we said in our evangelism, God, don't mention stewardship.
Yeah.
You know, we've really kept them in separate boxes.
Yeah.
So this is cool.
And I'm responsible for both committees. And with the evangelism committee, one of the things we talked about a lot, because we are lucky to have in our church somebody that does social media for a living, and has pretty limited time, but is given of it generously and her wisdom. And part of what we did in evangelism that was part of the process of who we selected for these videos was to look at local demographic data and say, and there was some conversation about this perhaps yesterday, about creating personas or profiles about who are the people in our local community we want to connect with, whether it's the kind of retiree who still has lots of gifts to share. So we had somebody like that in that category that came to our church. Because we said, most people in our community are between 35 and 55, and with demographic data from our denomination and information from Facebook data, figuring out, what are those people interested in, who are they? And then we had some focus groups where people came and we tried to say, we gave them all code names, here's Millennial Matt, and here's our retiree, and here's the mother of 3. And so we tried to hit some of those categories when the people that we asked to do this. So they're secretly awesome, and they also kind of fit the demographics of people. So that there was this end game that this is gonna go on the website, this is gonna go on YouTube, we're gonna promote it on our Facebook page. So we posted on Facebook and we boosted it so that we could get get the evangelism run out of that.
Super quick comment, a church that I know of did something like this, that it was like a 10-minute video and it was different people all in the same video. I think better strategy to do shorter videos of different people rather than lumping them all in together into one video.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, people don't watch for 10 minutes anymore. So I think like a whole series of 2-minute videos is ideal. Yeah, maybe even that's a little long, you know, for Jim. Jim's 30 seconds or less. Let's see. So I'm not going to hold you for time. So I'm going to share, this was the closing video that we did. So we decided we did this series, we did a man on the street video. And I just like this so much. It was the best video that we did of the series, and it kind of closed us out. So we had a final kind of call to action Sunday where like our finance guy got up and talked about giving, and you know, I gave a sermon about it, and we had this video to kind of help us kind of rally everybody and bring it about. And this was our favorite one. I think everybody's favorite one from the campaign. It's like 3 minutes long.
What I love about UDLC is the fact that it's a place where we can really gather with people who care about the community and care about learning about God and worshiping God and really bringing children up in a faithful community.
I like our activities for every age. I like our services. I love our choir. There's not much to not like.
I like UDLC because they're accepting of us wherever we are in our spiritual journey.
They're very open. I feel welcome here. And there's a lot of things for the kids to do.
You're allowed to try things, people embrace it, congregation supports it. And we have awesome pastors.
I like to do the Sunday school and meet friends because we learn about God and stuff.
It's the people and it's the band. It's just enjoying the music and enjoying that worship part.
I've met a lot of wonderful people here.
I now look forward to coming to church, which I don't think I would have ever said years ago.
So it's just a great place. And, we're alive, you can see that.
It's given us a warmth and a happiness, and so when people see that coming from you, they want to know what's going on. Like, why are you so happy? Like, what's going on?
UDLC has changed my life many times.
It has. It's really positively impacted my life because of all the friends that I've made like this week.
We came to UDLC about 20 years ago. It was right before we had a medical crisis in my family. And having the support of a faith community when you're dealing with life and death situations was invaluable. It changed our lives totally. The support we got, the prayers that were said for us.
UDLC has definitely made a positive impact. I've been going here since I was a baby, and it's like just really a second home for me, which is awesome.
It taught me how to help out with the community locally here and throughout the whole United States with different charitable volunteer programs.
The groups that they have, like with Chosen 300 and stuff, I feel like that helps other people and that inspires me to help others.
It gives us opportunities to go out into the community and really practice what we've learned here about spreading God's love and serving others.
It was life-changing for me because I'm doing things I never imagined I would be able to.
And it has been a great experience to be so involved in other parts of the world. Certainly more than just down there.
The more love God brings to us, the more love we have to give out to other people. And that's a constant thing where I'm being fed all the time and embraced all the time, and I'm able to go out and share that love and grace with other people.
We spend a lot of time as a family talking about what we're thankful about, and we really feel like a lot of that comes from what we learned about here in church, because it reminds us how much God has given us and how much God wants us to give to others.
So I think UDLC is a great place, and I would encourage as many people to come out and see us and care about us and get the feeling like you want to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, even if you did even if you just got somebody to come in and do that, just that one-off video. Like we showed that we didn't really have the time. Like Christmas Eve, at one of the services, we showed that almost as we showed that at the 3 o'clock service just before the welcome and the announcement time, just to kind of give people a flavor because there was so many visitors. But there are going to be lots of ways I think we're able to use that. But in a lot of ways, this campaign was like my love letter to my church to say, this is what I see in you. This is what I think is so special about you. And I want you to see that. And I want the world to see that. And to, make the case in terms of stewardship, that what this is all about is the difference that your presence and your gifts and your commitment and the way that you're involved, the ripple effects that has into the lives of other people. That, oftentimes people don't even know the people who are on the videos, let alone know the story, like Mo's story. So super quick, our website, like last year, we changed our website to match this campaign because I think we got the brand done in January, which is like super early for stewardship. So over the summer, I worked with a friend of mine and we created a new website. And this is actually a video. If you go to our website, udlc.org, you'll see it's just a silent running video that we embedded from YouTube. And if you click the learn more, there's a catalog of all the videos there. So the whole website is about the campaign, and the number one button, the thing, you see first, the red button takes you, and then you can look at all these videos that are embedded from YouTube, and they're also on our Facebook page. We created banners and we created bumper stickers of that. See, I really love this brand. So we created all that. Every week, in addition to the emails we sent out, we created these Instagram pull quotes. So we have a seminarian that's working with us, and he pulled screenshots from the videos and then did pull quotes from those interviews. And so on Instagram and then up to Facebook, throughout the week, like one a day throughout the week, we would put these up, which is really cool. And then we printed them off and then we put them around the narthex and stuff. Our administrator did that. I didn't even think about that print side of it, but she put those out. And then in the pledge letter that we sent out to everybody, we were able to capture those and make that the highlight of the letter. So the letter was shorter, it was clearer, it asked people to reflect on those two questions: how's it changed your lives? How does it empower you to change the world? And it had these kind of reminders, and we could send people to the website to say, if you haven't seen these stories, or look at these stories again as you think about what your commitment for the coming year will be.
Is that online?
That letter is not online, but I could, it's going to be it's on the slide set if you want to take a look at it. Yeah, and I already sent that in, so that'll be posted. And I think that's it, and I can't keep you any longer. But go to lunch, but if you want to have any comments or questions, I'll hang out for a while. Yeah. So thank you, everybody. I know there's a lot of talk. Yeah. From the webinar. Yep.
Amy asked, how much does all of this cost?
Right. So this was expensive. I mean, your cost will vary, but I don't want to go into the exact details about, but it was thousands, in the single thousands. To like the video project was extensive because we did this whole series of videos. We did the promo and the final, and we got a great discount on it. They gave us a good discount because we're a nonprofit and a faith community. So we won't do that every year. We can't do that next year, but it's something like that. It was. We shared the cost with stewardship and evangelism because it was a crossover kind of thing. So we had some money from the evangelism budget and some money from the stewardship budget. So we were able to share the cost a little bit in that regard. Next year I might just be shooting it on my iPhone if we're going to do more videos. Or because we have this library of videos, maybe next year we do like 3. Maybe there's a few stories we want to capture. We do one shot. So we'll just have to kind of revisit that. But there are definitely cheaper ways to go about doing something like this. But I felt like for this year, we really needed a new brand, and this was part of our evangelism strategy as well. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, webinar folks. Thanks. Enjoy lunch.